Welcome to SLP Full Disclosure. I'm Michelle and I'm your host. And today we're going to be talking about the second part of my favorite thing in the whole wide world, which is language development. In the previous podcast, we hit on that birth to 18-month age range, and we talked about the importance of just talking to your babies, giving them opportunities to explore different toys, and just showing them how to play with things, because play is really, it's the basis for everything. It's cognitive development, language development, fine motor development, gross motor development, all of the things combined, right? So we talked about the tell them what to do, show them how to play with the toy, and if they don't understand it, then we're going to help them. I briefly mentioned the extended wait time, and this becomes super, super important in this 18 to 36 month age range. And like I said, back in the day, it was called the Environmental Control Prompt Hierarchy, which is a really, really long name for just wait. If you follow it step by step, you give the direction, you wait. And when I say wait, I think in my previous podcast, I did like a silence for 3 seconds, and it's very awkward because we feel like when we're teaching language and we're teaching kids to do things that we have to fill that space with words, and we don't. So quick story time. When I was in graduate school at the University of Central Florida, as all of you speech pathologists know, you have to record yourself as an undergraduate working in the university clinic, working with your kiddos. There's the two-way mirror. The parents are on the other side. Typically, the supervisor is over there, the licensed speech pathologist. And you record yourself, and then you have to watch it back. And in this class, we would watch them back as a class, like the next week or a couple of weeks later, and we would critique one another. We would critique ourselves. The professor would give tips and tricks, or this was really good. This is a better way to approach this. And this was a 50-minute session that I was doing solo by myself. I was getting ready to graduate, so I thought I was ready to go. And it was a language child. So a child who had limited language. We were trying to develop words, develop language. And when we played it back in class, the professor had a stopwatch, old-timey stopwatch with the little buttons on top. And every time I talked, he would hit a stopwatch and he would time it. And then when I would stop talking, he would stop it. And then I would start talking again and he would start it. So this goes on for the entire session. And at the end of it, he was like, this is what we're going to learn today. The environmental control prompt hierarchy. Because Michelle has talked for over 40 minutes of a 50-minute language session with a 5 or 6-year-old little boy. So I had talked for over 40 minutes, which means that I gave him 10 minutes to fill that space. I wasn't giving him time. So when I teach my families about the the extended wait time, we're going to call it the wait time. When I teach my families how to implement wait time in playing with their kids, I tell them up front, this is absolutely by far the hardest thing that you're going to do and learn to implement, because we feel like if they're not doing it or they're not saying something, we have to jump in. All of us have heard, and I'm guilty as charged. Look, here, put it in. Here's the bucket. Put it in. 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 And again, like I talked about in the previous episode, we're just bombarding them. We've got to give them time to process. We're going to tell them. We're going to show them. We're going to help them. We're going to move on. All right. So we've got an 18-month-old. We're in that 18-month age range. Hopefully we've got some words. If we don't, I don't want you as a speech pathologist to panic. This is something else I might get a lot of slack for. Again, I have a tough skin and I can take it. I don't like to use the term language delay in children birth to 3 because I prefer to use late talker because communication is different for everybody. And I also want the speech pathologist to know and understand that not all kids are going to develop at the same rate. It's okay if they're a little bit late of a talker. As long as our play skills are good, our other areas are developing, we've got good engagement, that child will learn to communicate. When we start seeing red flags, well, that's going to be a whole nother episode. So I'm not even going to go there right now because that could be a whole episode in and of itself. Katie's laughing at me. She's like, yes, don't go there. Stay on topic. So, communication is 3 steps. You approach a partner, deliver a message, and you receive something in return. And that receiving something in return for an 18-month-old is going to be something that's motivating, something that they like, something that they want. So if you've got a child who's really motivated to go outside and play outside, then what is a word that we can teach them? Maybe open, or maybe jump, or maybe bike, or maybe soccer ball. Because we're going to teach them this word gets you what you want. Okay. What if they can't say open? What do we do then? All right. So this episode in this podcast, we're talking about children who are typically developing children who are having a hard time learning language, or typically developing child that we're just pushing that language. Okay. Like I said, those kids who have other challenges, we're not going to talk about that right now. So these are typically developing children that have good engagement. They have good cognitive skills. All of those other areas, gross motor, fine motor, all of those things are developing on target and like they should. But what do we do with that language? So we're going to give this 18-month-old lots and lots of choices, because we cannot forget that we have to continue to develop that receptive language as well. And it's at this point in the game that we're going to start giving them little jobs to do. Throw this in the garbage can. Bring me your cup. Go get your shoes. Those kinds of things. We're giving them a little bit more independence. They're mobile. They're moving around. They can do things. They can navigate their environment. So we're going to give them things to do to really raise the bar on those receptive language skills. We wouldn't expect an 18-month-old to be able to follow a 2-step direction. Put this in the garbage can and bring me your cup. At 18 months old to 24 months old, we're going to really stick to those single-step directions, making it easy for them. And it's okay as a mom or as a speech pathologist if you set those things up. Because remember, we've got to continue to develop those receptive language skills as well. So are they understanding what we're saying? Because if they don't understand what we're saying and they don't understand, put that in the garbage, which they should if we have followed those steps and we've done what we should have done by telling them, showing them, and helping them early on with putting things in and taking things out and showing them how things work. So once we get to this point in the game, this is when it gets really, really fun, because they're just little sponges. They take in everything we do. And it's at this point that receptive language is probably growing so much that we have to start spelling words like park. So instead of saying park or ice cream or popsicle or grandma's house, we have to start spelling it, because when they hear it, they get super excited, right? That's why we spell things when they're this age. But we're going to work on getting these kids to say more words. If we've got that good motor skill and that good motor imitation piece, and they can do things with their body that we can do. Remember, from birth to 18 months, we've been singing Wheels on the Bus. We've been playing peekaboo. We've been rolling cars back and forth. Now at 18 months, that play is going to start looking a little bit different, You're going to start getting into that symbolic play. You're going to start getting into the imaginative play and the pretend play. And for moms of little boys, don't be afraid to play tea party with your babies and doing those things with a teddy bear or even with your action figures if you have to. Pretending to give the baby something to drink, taking a remote control. Do they use toys that are not specific for other things? So do they take that remote control and put it up to their ear and pretend it's a phone? That's that symbolic play. Are they doing those kinds of things? And when they're doing that, what are we doing? We're talking. We're talking. We're talking. We're talking. Oh, you've got a bear. Oh, you have a book. Oh, you've got the truck. Oh, it's a dump truck. Oh, you're on your bike. We're going to go fast. We're going to give them opportunities to hear those words in that activity that we're doing. One of my favorite things to do at this age is that repetition, that 1, 2, 3, go. And sign language. Let's talk a little bit about sign language. So what about those kids that, let me think for a second. So I hear parents say all the time, and I used to hear this early on in my career, and I think there might have been a moment early on that I thought this. Oh, he can talk or she can talk. They're just choosing not to. And that's not true. If a child could talk, they would talk, because words get them things much quicker. It's a much more efficient way to communicate. So if you've got a child at 18 months that's not using words, it's because they don't know that they can. So when we're in this 18 month to 24 month, that's when we're teaching them what I call the power of words. What can these words get me? We're going to be kind of withholding a little bit. So they love M&Ms. Okay, you want an M&M? Let me hear, We may not ask them to say the whole word. We're just going to get them to do one something vocally, verbally, imitating just that one sound. That's all we're going to do. If they do it, we're going to give it to them. So we are going to talk about sign language a little bit, because sign language can be very helpful in teaching the power of those words. And when I say power of words, I mean, what can this get me? Because let's just face it, toddlers they're pretty stingy little creatures, and they're not going to do something that they're not going to get something in return. And remember, I mentioned earlier that the basic steps of communication are to approach a partner, deliver a message, and receive something in return. And I tell parents all the time in this early language development phase that if they're getting everything that they want without having to deliver that message, meaning if their needs are being met without having to do anything, then why would they communicate? If they walk toward the kitchen or just glance toward their empty cup and mom's jumping up and going to fill the cup up with juice or milk or water, then there's no reason for them to indicate. So using that sign language, those early signs for example, the sign for more. As a speech pathologist, we know that the sign for more is the fingertips together in front of the hand, and we're signing more. And we don't want to get to the point where we're using that sign to mean food, and that's very easy to do. So what I always encourage my families to do is to use that sign for more in other things. Does your child like for dad or mom to pick them up and twirl them around holding their hands and swing them around? If they do, then do that. Have them sign more. We're going to tell them, do you want more? We're going to show them by putting our fingertips together in front of us, and we're going to gently sign more. Then we're going to help them do it. We're going to take their little hands. We're going to help them sign more. And then dad picks them up and swings them around again. I taught my daughter to sign more in the bathtub because she loved for me to pour cups of water over her head. So that's where she learned the power of that word. She thought it was hysterical when I would fill the cup up with water and just dump it over her head. Favorite thing in the world. And I taught her to sign more. She was probably 8 or 9 months old when I taught her to sign that. You can do the sign for more on the swing. You can do the sign for more for tickling, those kinds of things, because it teaches that kid the power. What is this going to do for me, right? But the whole time, we're not going to just sign more with our fingertips together and just look at the kid. We're going to be saying the word. We're pairing that word with that sign. And the reason that sign language is really important and can be super helpful in developing that early language and those early words is because they learn that this is a lot easier and I get things a lot faster, whether it's getting mom to get up and go outside. I tell parents all the time, as a speech pathologist, we're all familiar with what the word manding means. When I first get a family, how does your child communicate? They take me by the hand and they lead me where they want me to go. So they're pulling the mom into the kitchen and they're standing in front of the pantry. They're pulling the mom to the back door and they're standing and waiting for mom to open the door to go outside and maybe jump on the trampoline or play in the sandbox. So we can introduce the sign for more, where we put our hands, palm down, hands together, and then we pull them open, the sign for more. So it teaches those kids that if I do this, something happens, because then they're learning that they're delivering that message. So for those kids who are manding at 18 to 24 months, they're approaching the partner. So they've already mastered the first step of communication, which is to approach the partner. They're delivering a message by taking mom by the hand and leading them to where they want to go. And then they're receiving something in return, but they're not really having to do anything to get that thing in return. Their needs are just being met. And as moms, we know our kids better than anybody. We know the cry and the whine for sleepy. We know the cry and the whine for hungry. We know the cry and the whine for I'm just sad and I'm in a bad mood. So we know all of these things. So naturally, we're meeting those needs. But when you're trying to develop language, you have to take a step back. You have to model that word and tell your child exactly what to say in every situation. If they're leading you in the kitchen, what are we going to do? We're going to model juice. We're going to model open, because we're going to have to open the refrigerator. We're going to have to open the pantry. We're going to give them a choice. Give them choices at this age of things that there's no right or wrong answer. It's time for snack. And do you want the gummies or do you want the goldfish? It doesn't really matter. I know you've got a preference, but can you indicate that preference? Can you take responsibility for communicating what you want? When they reach for the goldfish, we're going to model goldfish. That's right. We may even move our hand, swimming like the sign for fish. So we may do something like that. But what we're doing when we're giving them choices is that we're making them an active participant in that communication exchange. Because if they aren't an active participant in that exchange, then their needs are just being met. I live by myself and I don't have anybody to look at or point to my coffee pot to get my coffee. But that's basically what kids are doing. If they're just looking or pointing or doing something, they're not an active participant in that communication exchange. So modeling those words. We ask kids all day long, say cookie, say book, say fish, especially in this 18 to 24 month old age range. And sometimes that can be intimidating. Saying cookie for me is really easy. So if you ask me, say cookie, I can do that. And that's not intimidating. I work with a lot of Spanish-speaking children out in California. And I learned a couple of years ago that language and saying things can be intimidating. And when I'm working with my kids, I ask them all day long, especially with articulation, say this, do it this way, do it that way. And I realized that what I'm asking them to do is hard and it's intimidating, and language is hard. And a lot of times kids don't have the confidence to go out on a limb to at least make that attempt at saying tractor or bubble. They just don't have the confidence to do that, and they don't know that they can. So making sure at this early stage of the language development, 18 to 24 months, that we're taking all verbal attempts. My kids out in California love to teach me Spanish words, and I've got the animals and I've got some colors and I know a few food items that I can remember. But when they come and they talk to me about the food, the the meals that they eat over the weekend, and the words and the phrases can be like really, really super long. And I remember the day that one of the little girls came and told me that she had had a birthday party that she went to and with her grandparents, and that they had eaten something. It was a Spanish dish, a Hispanic dish. And it seemed to be 10 miles long. And I remember when she said it to me, the first thing I said was, oh my goodness, I'm not even going to try to say that. And it dawned on me in that moment, I am an adult with excellent communication skills, good motor control, good articulation skills, and I didn't have the confidence to even try to say that word or that dish that she said in Spanish. So we've got to keep that in mind as well. In this 18 to 24 month age group, it can be intimidating and it can be hard. So taking a step back, I tell families this all the time. If you've asked your child to say cookie and they say blah, we're going to say, good job trying to say cookie. Here's your cookie. Because what we are looking for at this age is, did they turn their voice on? Did they understand that prompt, that me telling them, say cookie, did they turn their voice on? Or did they fall out and they start crying? That's another episode that we're going to talk about. So any attempt, any word approximation, and so many times I have found with my families that the kid may have a lot more words than what the parents are giving them credit for, because as speech language pathologists, you all know that we're considered trained listeners. So I know what to listen for, and I can pretty much interpret any jibber jabber that I hear at this point in the game. And I'm like, well, they just said this or they just said that. And mom's like, I think you may be right. That is what they said. And so then we can work on that. Then once we get to that point where they're at least turning their voice on and they're at least giving us some kind of attempt, we can work with that. Okay. So we've got we're up to 24 months. What do we do from 24 to 36 months? We're going to do the same exact thing, but we're just going to continue to raise the bar, raise the bar, raise the bar. So many times I see young speech pathologists and parents tell me, well, I want them to say please and thank you. Okay, yes, we want them to use those pleasantries, right? Most kids are going to grow up being very polite children. But words like please and thank you early on when we're trying to develop language and words, are we going to continue to model them? Absolutely. If the child imitates them, great. But we're not going to push that to be a first word because, again, approach, deliver, receive. What are they receiving when they say please and thank you? They're not really receiving anything. That's more for our benefit, for mom's benefit. So I always use and hold off on those pleasantries and pushing those pleasantries until that 24 to 36 months age range, because then that helps me add a word to another word that's going to increase that phrase length, increase that MLU. So the child's been saying cookie. Now we're going to say cookie, please. The child we know says mom. So now we're going to say mom, cookie, please. 24 to 36 months is where we're going to start pushing those I want phrases. And I have the funniest story. One of my families, when we started pushing that I want phrase, the mom was like, he's getting so confused because every time I model I want and I ask him, say I, he points to his eyes. So again, keeping in mind that kids are super literal, and that's okay. So I told mom, I said, just let him point to I and say, I want juice. I want cookies. Finding those things that are motivating for 24 to 36 months, it's usually pretty easy because at that point, you're starting to see their personalities. You're starting to see things that they like to play with. Increase that imaginative play, increase that pretend play, making sure that they're playing with a variety of toys. One thing that I'm a huge advocate for is not having, and I think I said it in my earlier podcast in the birth to 18 months, is not going out and buying all the super duper expensive toys. You can find things for kids, they prefer to play with the box anyway, right? But making sure that even if you do have all of those things, try not to have them all available, because kids that are in that 18 to 36 month age range, 24 to 36 months, their attention is pretty short. We could expect them to attend for about 1 minute for every year they are old. So if they've got 1,000 toys, maybe not 1,000, but if they've got 25 or 30 toys in their toy box that are accessible to them at all the time that they can get to, number one, they don't have to communicate to mom, I want this particular truck, or I want this Hulk, or I want that baby doll. They don't have to communicate it because it's accessible to them. So we have to make sure that it's really important at this age that we're setting the environment up for communication, because if they've got access to the pantry and all the snacks are down low in the pantry and they can go and open the door and get what they want, then there's no need for them to approach, deliver, and receive anything. If they've got access to their toys, it's the same thing. One recommendation that I love giving to my parents, and that a lot of parents have taken and done, is getting a tub or even just putting the toys away and keeping out 3, 4, or 5 toys to play with at a time, so that the child can increase their ability to attend and focus with that toy, that they can learn to play with it appropriately. So then if it's a pop-up toy, or if it's a truck, or if it's a ball, or if it's a stacking thing, or whatever it may be, that they learn the functional use and the functional play. If they've got access to 50 toys and you've got blocks over here and this piece with that piece, then they don't understand how it all goes together, and they don't understand how it works. So when we're playing appropriately and functionally with a toy, and we understand that when we stack the rings, we have to put the big one and then the next one and then the next one and the next one, that helps language development. But it also is targeting cognitive skills, and it's also targeting fine motor skills. So you can see how it's all intertwined. So I tell parents, put out 3 to 5 toys at a time and put the others away, out of sight, out of mind, and put them in something that the kid has to communicate to you, I want to get that open. So then they're becoming a more active participant in that communication exchange. They have to do something in order to get something. That's something that my early intervention families hear me say a lot. You've got to set the environment up in that 18 to 36 month age range to where the child has to do something verbally in order to get something. Again, no more freebies. We can't just meet their needs. And I see this a lot, especially in family dynamics where you've got older siblings. Maybe you've got a 2 or 3 year old, but you've also got a 7, a 9, and a 10-year-old. And then you've got 2 parents, right? So you've got 2 adults, and then you've got 3 older kids who are taller, that can reach things, that can pour juice, that can pour milk. And so they're trying to do what they want to do, and they're just meeting that child's needs. So that child doesn't have to communicate. We've got to make sure, especially at this 24 to 36, 18 to 36 month age range, that we're setting the environment up so that they do have to communicate. We're modeling words for them. We're telling them, we're showing them, we're helping them, and we're accepting their attempt at that word, at saying that word. Word approximations. Cookie doesn't have to be perfect. Again, we start talking about all of the little intricacies of language development and articulation development. So Cookie, obviously very highly motivating for kids that age, but that K sound is a late developing sound. But Bubble the B is an early developing sound. So knowing that when we ask the kids to say the word, it's okay if it doesn't sound exactly like it's supposed to sound. We're going to still accept that attempt. We're going to praise them. They're going to receive something in return, and it's going to be fabulous. Okay? So I think today, from this episode, what I hope you've taken away is that we have to set the environment up for communication, and we have to teach children the power of their words or their communication attempts, whether it be words or signs or gestures, but that they have to be an active participant in that communication exchange and that they have to do something in order to get something. Again, I could talk for 3 hours about just what to do, different activities. But I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I hope it's given you some things to talk about and to think about and that you can implement. The approach, deliver, and receive has been something that a lot of my early intervention families have said really resonated with them because it kind of broke that communication down. What are they doing? They're not communicating. They're not using words. Well, are they doing part of it? Are they approaching you? Yes. Are they delivering a message? Yes. It might be gestures. It might be pointing, and it might be a tantrum here and there. But then are they receiving something in return? So I think that might be the biggest takeaway. Approach, deliver, and receive. Making sure that we're setting the environment up for communication and that we're accepting any attempt that we get, because these little ones, speech is a motor act. Words are hard. Language is hard. And if we're not giving them the opportunity to practice and we're not telling them what we want them to do, we're not showing them and we're not helping them, then it's going to make it that much harder. And learning to communicate and learning words should not be traumatic. So I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. Tune in next time, and I'm sure we're going to have some great guests coming on, and I'm looking forward to seeing you guys soon. Thanks. Thank you for tuning in to SLP Full Disclosure. You can learn more about this episode and our show on our website at amnhealthcare.com. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend and subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast platform. You can also find show updates and SLP opportunities on our Instagram at AMN Allied. Special thanks to AMN Healthcare for making this show possible. See y'all next time.